The Warriors is a 1979 proto-comic book cum action thriller movie that's been on my to-watch list pile for far too long, in all honesty. I first heard about it as a preteen, and from then it's always been one of those films that's just skirted on the cusp of being watched but always been eclipsed by other movies. To me, it's always been the I'll watch it later movie. It was only in early 2019, when I'd managed to get my hands on a very handsome pre-cert copy of this film, that I'd decided to get this one signed off once and for all. And I'm really glad I did. In hindsight, I kinda wish I'd watched this one much sooner, as it's really a very enjoyable film to sit through. This is one of those movies where me telling you the plot won't really sell the movie to you. Its joy lies in its execution, how it plays with plot elements and the incredibly eccentric world it creates. So basically, The Warriors follows, well, the Warriors. A street gang from Coney Island who are tough on violence and tough on the causes of violence. They're anti-heroes ultimately, no one steps on their turf, they regularly start fights and cause trouble. But they're likeable antagonists, their hearts seem to be in the right place. They just have quite stark delinquent streaks running through them. Anyway, that's beside the point. The Warriors are just one of over 100 gangs that have carved up the streets of New York and who operate under Cyrus. Cyrus is kinda like the program manager of these gangs. He mobilises them to work together in order to keep the peace through New York. His work mainly consists of keeping anti-Cyrus gangs at bay and settling turf disputes. But he's also keen on expanding. So he's called all the gangs across the city together to a special meeting where he wants to announce the project's expansion. The rules of the meeting are simple. Everyone has to attend and no one should be carrying a weapon, no packing. And almost every gang complies with this, apart from one gang, the Rogues, who've decided to use the opportunity as an attempt as both a power grab and because they're all a little bit fucked up and like to have fun that could result in a mass bloodbath. So they inform the police ahead of time about Cyrus's meeting, effectively allowing a massive sting operation to go ahead, and then simultaneously one of the rogues, Luther, manages to smuggle a gun into the meeting. At the peak of Cyrus's speech, Luther shoots Cyrus and the police swarm in. In the resulting confusion, the rogues pin the assassination and the sting operation on the Warriors, who instantly become public enemy number one. The leader of the Warriors is then almost immediately elbowed to death by what appears to be kung fu-inspired gang members, and the rest of the team barely make it out of the meeting in one piece. But their troubles are just beginning, as the Riffs, another rival gang, step up to fill in Cyrus's place, and their first order is an all-out hit on the Warriors in retribution. And so with the entire network working against them, their leader no longer of this realm and no weapons to defend themselves, the Warriors must navigate the New York subway system and overground, taking down creeps of all kinds to make it back to Coney Island, avoiding all the temptations and terrors that await them on their journey. There's a big elephant in the room that's caused me a lot of trouble when it's come to talking about this movie, and that issue is the director's cut. Whew, boy, the director's cut. Now, I can appreciate that often director's cuts or extended editions can drastically improve a movie's quality. Blade Runner's probably the best example of this, where almost any cut, barring the original theatrical cut, is widely seen as preferable. The Warriors unfortunately suffers from the polar opposite here, however. The theatrical cut's fantastic, a fast-paced, slightly campy, cartoonish runaround in New York with a gritty undercurrent and a kick-ass soundtrack. The director's cut, though? Eesh, it's a rough watch. For starters, they massacre what was originally a punchy and in-your-face intro that really got you into the feel and vibe of the movie. How does it do this? By shoving some very out-of-place and way too modern-looking animations at the beginning, effectively creating a prologue which charts the history of gang culture violence and heavily links the movie to The Odyssey, where once it was a subtle nod in the theatrical cut. More atrociously, they've introduced new transitions to this movie, where once were simple cuts, now the whole bloody film pauses, turns to pop art, zooms back, revealing the back pages of what I can only assume is Zap magazine, before we crash into another panel which then deposterises, recommencing the next scene. This ruins the film's fluidity. It doesn't just detract, it out and out destroys the pacing. It's obnoxious, overlong, and completely removes any immersion into the film. If it had been used sparingly, maybe the beginning and end only, I'd have probably been a bit more on board with it. But it happens a good 4 to 6 times through the whole film. And every time it did happen, I had enough time to check my phone or go put the kettle on. It was that sluggish and disruptive. The movie's writer and director, Walter Hill, claims in the introduction to the director's cut that the film was heavily inspired by comic books, and that he felt in the original cut that it wasn't quite shown in the way he originally envisioned. But this is obnoxious. There's no other word for it, really. It takes a subtle element of the film's overall theme and vibe and pushes it so far into your face you're blinded by anything but it. It feels like Hill became obsessed with movies like Sin City and Watchmen and really wanted to make The Warriors feel more like one of those kind of movies, which it just isn't. It's inspired by comics, it draws a lot of themes from comics, but this isn't a comic book movie, no matter how much the director would like it to be that. I think people should have the choice of which cut they'd like to see, says Hill. If they don't like the director's cut, fair enough, he follows up with. I'm paraphrasing. He neglects to add that the theatrical cut, to my knowledge, hasn't had a worldwide Blu-ray release at this point, and that the only one available in the UK is the director's cut. So that pissed me right off from the start. It should also be stated that the UK Blu-ray version of this release doesn't make it clear that this is the director's cut either. It doesn't list any information as to what cut's on the box, and had I known that this was the director's cut, I'd have saved £10 and bought something worth my time. As it stands, I'll be watching this movie in its pre-cert format until they give me the choice not to watch this cut, but I thought I'd get that warning out of the way right away. There is no theatrical Blu-ray release. I should also say that while I personally will never watch the director's cut again, there is one thing I do like about it. They've chosen to reframe some shots in the movie, the most notable one being when Luther shoots Cyrus. Generally, these reframings put more of the picture back into the shot, and I felt these more set back shots actually made the film feel a bit more theatric. I liked most of those amendments. There were a couple of digital movements within this cut that felt a bit unnatural, but the reframed shots, yeah, I liked those. That's it though. For the sake of this review, I'm going to be talking about the theatrical cut from here on in, as even though it's not as widely available, it is a hell of a lot more enjoyable and it's much easier to tell you why. For starters, the cinematography's great, it's dirty, gritty, it reeks of mid to late 70s and has a real pulpy quality about it. The opening sequence around the neon-lit fairground and the strip-light-soaked subway stations is a real treat. It's kind of got that disgusting beauty style to it. Like, I wouldn't want to be in any of these locations because everything looks filthy. But the shots collected here make that filth both stand out and define the tone of the film itself. In that sense, it's a really pretty watch, and it still retains a freshness about it that modern films still seem to replicate to this day. Only enhancing these grungily pleasant visuals is the soundtrack, and it's a stonker. A grab bag of Springsteen-esque rock ballads, 60s Motown classics, Clockwork Orange-esque experimental synth pieces, and Latin American fast vibes. The whole thing suits this film's tone perfectly. Honestly, it's hard for me to imagine the film without this score. After my first viewing, I immediately went out of my way to go and pick up the OST. My favourite tracks on this album are In Havana, In the City, and the electrically charged cover of Nowhere to Run, If You Must Know. It's quickly become a favourite of mine, and if nothing else, I advise you give it a spin sometime, as it's so diverse you're sure to find at least one track that you really like. Outside of the soundtrack and Cine, the editing's probably the best thing about this film. While it never quite tops its opening 5 minutes in which we quickly cut between shots of New York, shots of the gangs getting ready to go to the meeting, shots of the New York subway system, and quick snippets of the gangs effectively giving us the backstory to bring us up to speed, it still does a damn fine job through the rest of the movie of investing us in the characters, their emotions, and the carnage that unfolds over the course of that night in the quick yet effective showing and not telling style of filmmaking. A highlight for me would be the scenes involving the Lizzies, an all-girl gang. If you look closely at the scene as it's unfolding, it's telling the audience that something isn't right without explicitly verbally telling them that. I'm not crazy in saying that had this movie been edited any differently, that it would have been a disaster. Thanks to the director's cut giving us an alternate look at what might have been, I now feel confident in saying that, in my opinion, had this movie been cut any differently, it would have been a disaster. The acting in this is as you'd expect. It's a campy, comic book inspired movie, so there are plenty of quiet, tough guy performances on display alongside scenery chewing and over-the-top bad guys. Luther, played by David Patrick Kelly, is an absolute storm in this film. Kelly himself is a fantastic actor for roles like this. He played Sully in Commando and one of the Horn brothers in Twin Peaks. But here he's in full-blown mad villain mode and steals every scene he's in. He's an absolute delight. The relationship between Swan and Mercy, played by Michael Beck and Deborah Van Valkenburgh, is a bubbling little joy as well. It's never made overtly clear that they want to have a relationship, but there's a lot of tension that builds up through the movie, and it gave me one of my favourite scenes in this film. There's a bit towards the end of the movie where the gang are making their way back to Coney. They're beaten, bloodied and covered in dirt, when all of a sudden the train they're on stops at a station and a gang of well-dressed kids get on board and start smiling and joking away. They sit opposite Swan and Mercy, and for a brief moment in their silence, the film sums up their relationship perfectly in just a handful of shots. I loved that. I loved that they decided to do such a hard contrast between these characters and normality. That Swan, through just a very simple set of hand movements, tells the audience, and Mercy, that she doesn't have to make herself up to fit in with the normal crowd and that she is who she is. And furthermore, in that one action, shows that Mercy, a character who initially is referred to as a whore who the gang couldn't even be bothered to jump, has now earned the respect of the gang. They may never actually have a relationship beyond this film, they may never see each other again beyond this film, but within this one night's event they formed a very unique bond. It's fascinating, and the actors' performances in these scenes really bring the subplot to life. Though clearly supporting these fantastic performances is a top-notch script too. While initially adapted from a novel by Sol Urich, the film and the novel differ greatly. Here there's a rich detail of characters and backstories. The dialogue is smooth, naturalistic and reflective of 70s slang from the time. The story's engaging, and while the choreography of the fights and some of the elongated running about scenes could have been shortened or bettered, for the most part I can dig it. Another thing that I like is that gangs are seen for maybe a few seconds and then never appear again for the rest of the film. And the depth of these gangs' styles and characters are rich and varied. The Baseball Furies are probably the most iconic of these gangs outside of the Warriors themselves, but for my money I like the Orphans, a gang so unpopular and rubbish they didn't even get invited to the meeting. Their gang colours are t-shirts and jeans, and they're generally pushed around, ignored or belittled. They have the crappiest part of town, and the one time they do stand up for themselves in this film, they get firebombed. Also, bonus points for the Mime Gang. I don't know what the hell they do, but I'd pay money to see a spin-off film dealing just with those guys. Equally, the direction itself has a lot to be proud of. It constantly puts the audience in a position of feeling like the film's moving. Even in scenes of atmospheric tension, that direction, that style and actor guidance is dramatically present. It feels like this director wanted to put his stamp and mark on every single frame of this picture, and while, as I've mentioned, the director's cut for me is a bridge too far, here in the theatrical cut, scenes flow effortlessly and actors behave in a way that's so fitting of this universe. I don't know how many more ways I can really say this looks great, but this looks great. As mentioned earlier, this film was directed and co-written by Walter Hill. Hill's work is varied and plentiful and includes Red Heat and Brewster's Millions amongst others. He's also credited as a producer on all of the Alien movies, at least all the ones I could think of at the time of this recording, so that's something. Basically, he's a safe, well-respected old hand in the game, and it's clear to see with this film why he's as respected as he is. Just don't let him anywhere near the editing process of your movie. Jesus. The film was also co-written by David Shaber. He has 11 writing credits, and there's plenty of good things going on in there too, including The Hunt for the Red October. So again, a safe pair of hands at the wheel. Combined, this pair have turned out a very strange yet wonderful movie that I personally really enjoyed. The Warriors was released on VHS initially in either 1980 or 1981. It was one of the earliest VHS tapes commercially available in the UK. It then later came to DVD in the UK in 2005, before finally landing a Blu-ray release in 2017 by Paramount Entertainment. There's been one release of the theatrical cut in Blu-ray. It's Region B, it's German, and it was limited to 1,500 units. It's been sold out now for over a year, and it averages roughly £100 on eBay or Amazon for a copy. Other than that, the director's cut seems to be literally the only way to see this film on physical disc media. The theatrical cut does, however, stream on some websites. So whenever you see this film on Netflix or Amazon Prime or the like, play the first 20 seconds. If it opens with a load of bollocks about Greek mythology, then it's the director's cut. But if it opens with a Ferris wheel, you, my friends, are in for a treat. This film looks gorgeous in HD, and I really wish the theatrical cut had a wider release because it's such a shame to see how poorly represented it is. Oh, also the director's cut Blu-ray menu is ridiculous. It makes it look like a generic Mission Impossible style action movie. There's a hell of a lot of extras though present, so I guess that's a plus. The Warriors is a great movie. It could be argued that it's a bit of its time, but I'd say it does what it does really well, and it shines through as a true cult classic. If you're looking for a good old-fashioned grimy underground thriller that'll make you smirk, check this one out. It's a damn fun little trip that I don't think you'll forget in a hurry.